Welcome to RGV On the Rise, a limited series podcast about the economy and opportunities of Hidalgo County, the Rio Grande Valley, and South Texas. Please say hello to today's guest.
Welcome, Dr. Daniel King, Executive Director of the Region 1 Educational Service Center, former superintendent of both the PSJA and Hidalgo school districts, and one of the most innovative educators in Texas. Region 1 is now spearheading a pioneering dropout recovery program that's targeting adults. But this isn't a new concept for you. Back almost 20 years ago in 2007, a national study declared that some 24 high schools in the RGV were so-called dropout factories. How did you respond to the news at that time?
Well, we responded to the news there in PSJ. Just before the news came out, I believe it came out maybe October of 2007. I went into PSJ in July of 2007. And based on the data I saw there, prior to this report, I saw that PSJ had a huge problem with students dropping out and not completing high school on time. I think only about 62% of students completed their high school diploma within 4 years. And the dropout rate in PSJ was more than double the state average. So we had tackled that very quickly by setting up, by the start of the school year in 2007, we had started up a campus that initially that first semester we focused on seniors that should have graduated the prior year, which there were over 200 of those. We brought them back into a special high school where they could finish up their last credits and prepare for their exit exams. And to help them to not be wasting time and give them more purpose, we partnered with South Texas College, where they could do dual enrollment and get started on their college work with their peers who had graduated in May. They could get started on that while they were finishing up their high school work.
Now, 2007 was an interesting year because that same year the Texas legislature passed some changes in the school funding bill, House Bill 1137.
Yes.
And few people noticed something, but you did. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I noticed some wording that had never appeared before in the school finance and student attendance that indicated that students could be funded up to their 26th birthday. Kind of 18 through 25, or if they turn 26 during this school year, they could complete out that school year.
September 1 is the magical date,
September
right?
1 is a magical date. For school age determination, September 1 is the magical date. That bill that language had been given no publicity. It was very unknown, and it was kind of intended for running some tutoring programs, to help some adults who maybe had not passed their exit exam primarily. And when I read the language, I thought up until then, 21 was the cutoff age for getting school funding. And so I thought, well, I can open this up to adults from past years who didn't graduate and get them in. So we did that in January 2008. We started bringing in young people up to age 26 into this, we called it the College Career and Technology Academy.
Now, it's significant if you could tell a little bit about school funding. I mean, that means a lot of money, and it's money that you have no problem acquiring as long as they fulfill whatever requirements exist.
Right. Yes, if students fulfill enrollment requirements, which basically is to be a resident of Texas, in those days we focused primarily on residents within your geographical boundaries. Today, most schools have gone open enrollment, meaning most school districts will accept students from outside their boundaries as well. The state of Texas doesn't care. They'll fund you whether the student lives in your boundaries or not, as long as they live in the state of Texas.
And how much are we talking about?
Well, today, I mean, back then it was, not nearly as much. Of course, inflation happens as well. But today, on the average, I would say Valley districts, for a student who's in attendance every day, we receive on the average combination of the local and state taxes, receive on the average of $11,000 or even some even more per student. And so what this language in the education code did is allowed that same funding to be used for older students. And like I said, the initial intent, there was some companion legislation that allowed you to accumulate attendance hour by hour, so that adults that attended at night, let's say if they attended 2 or 3 nights a week, an hour or two each night, those could be added up, and every 4 hours would earn a school day of funding. I didn't see it that way, and I brought him into to basically a regular school day to come into school every day. Started generating the funding that way. The next a subsequent legislative session, based on the work we had started in PSJ and that was beginning to be replicated around the state, the legislature basically doubled down on that legislation and basically clearly made it clear that it could be used the way we were using it.
So it began with unintended consequences, but
Yes.
when they learned of this through
Right.
what you read, they said, "Okay, let's do
Right.
it."
So I did not know their intent, and I saw what I could do with it, and we started doing it. It was working. So based on that, then the legislature said everybody should be doing this, basically. So they passed a bill a few years later, encouraging everyone to do it and encouraging community colleges to also get in. Very much exactly what we're doing, which was partnering with a community college. They encouraged that to be done statewide.
Now, you said you did start with STC as a
Yes,
partner.
from day one.
Was it a dual program or?
Yes, so we set it up as a dual credit program, and so we worked on getting students started on the college work. A goal of them getting certifications that they could go out and get a job with, or going on to an associate degree or a bachelor's degree. There's a young man teaching in PSJ today that had just turned 26 that got into that program. He was a high school dropout, and he's got a bachelor's degree in teaching today.
Wow.
And so there's many other students that went on to become welders, you name it.
And part of the enrollment requirement is that you have to spend at least 4 hours a day in class. Is that correct?
Well, for the 4 hours it equals a full day of funding. What we tried to do, a lot of times young people who have not completed school need the discipline of a schedule and of a routine. And so typically someone who has fallen off track, sometimes it's things that happen in their life, but sometimes it's also personal issues. Sometimes it's self-discipline, motivation. And so we found that it works a lot better. What we did do is we didn't require them to be in school morning and afternoon. We had them choose either morning or afternoon. But we really aimed for them coming in 4 hours a day, every day.
And part of that seems
we modified that if needed.
Part of that seems to address logistical concerns. I'm sure a lot of these adult
Yes.
students had jobs
They had
or
jobs,
families.
they had children, in many cases, and so forth. So one of the things that we talked about back then is with these students that need special attention, instead of forcing them to fit a traditional high school model, design a school that fits them and fits around their needs. So some of the things that we did, for example, is we picked them up in the morning. If they had small children and they wanted to enroll them in daycare, we would drop them off at the daycare
Wow.
on the way. So the bus would pass by the daycare. The young adult parent would step down and take their child into the daycare, get back on, and then after school we'd do the same thing. And so that would take care of both transportation and daycare. If they were eligible, then we worked with workforce the workforce board to help fund the daycare for those that needed that. Or in some cases, we used our budget to help with the daycare. So we tried to remove any barriers to them being able to attend.
Now, I'm going to quote you to yourself. You once said, "This is the rare opportunity in which a huge problem has been identified, but there's a provable solution and there's available funding for that solution. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Here's a problem when we talk about the dropout situation. It's a huge problem. It costs all of us, because young people that are not educated, it costs all of us in multiple ways. They're more likely, I mean, it's common sense, first of all, but the evidence is there. They're more likely to wind up on government assistance. They're more likely, there's a higher percentage that wind up incarcerated, and so forth. And then their parents, most of them become parents, and then the educational system usually struggles more with their children. And so obviously it affects their quality of life, their earnings. It affects economic development, because the more individuals you have without having completed their education, the more you have of an unskilled workforce and so forth. So it affects all of us one way or another. But because you can get significant funding, the same funding that you get for any student in first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, you can get significant funding. It's a matter of having the will and getting organized. And it's a little different work, because now you're working with young adults, right? But it's a matter of getting, getting organized and setting up the plan and setting up the program. And so there's no reason not to do it, because it benefits all of us, and the funding is there.
And what, in the case of the PSJA program, was the net impact of the program?
The net impact there in PSJ was that during the 12 years I was there that we ran the program, we graduated approximately 3,000 18 to 26-year-olds. Districts all up and down the valley replicated the program. Valley-wide during that same time, another 2,000 to 3,000 young people across the other valley districts also graduated through similar programs. So the net impact was between 5,000 to 6,000 just here in the valley, young adults getting their high school diploma.
Well, if I could interrupt you on that one, let's fast forward. 2019, you retire.
Yes.
A year later, the pandemic breaks out. And this very successful program became a victim of that.
Yes.
And during the height of the pandemic, it was set aside, correct?
So this program was pretty much set aside in PSJ and quite a few districts due to two factors. One, as the state, the state accountability system went through a period where it was unintentional, almost like the funding was unintentional. It was unintentional that it became more unfriendly to these programs, and so these students became sort of a drag on school districts' grades or scores. And so some school districts began pulling back and becoming less aggressive about the work, because there was the reality of feeling like you were being penalized for doing the work in terms of in the public eye, in terms of the rating you get. Second of all, the pandemic, when all the schools went remote and so forth, we all know, we've seen the learning loss. It's in the news all the time about how much students fell by the wayside and all of this. Well, these highly at-risk young adults often came from low-income households, struggled with regular school with somebody working with them every day. They also became some of the most at risk when everything went remote. Often they didn't have the technology, within their home. They may not have known how to use it. They also are students that often need somebody constantly following up with them. And so we see nationwide, statewide, and here in the Rio Grande Valley, the dropout rate skyrocketed during the pandemic. There had been a lot of progress being made on it, and it skyrocketed during the pandemic. So
we emerged from the pandemic. You are convinced to take the leadership role of Region 1 ESC, and you initiate this program once again. What's your hope for establishing the program in the 8-county area that Region 1 serves?
Yeah, my hope is to have this program available pretty much in every community throughout Region 1. And so last year we started some pilot partnerships. So what we're offering, because we know the school districts are struggling right now, just with getting back to normalcy, post-pandemic. At the same time, the accountability system has changed, the rigor of the tests the students are taking. They have teacher shortages, so they have all these issues that they're dealing with. They have budget issues, and so in many cases they may not have the time or the energy to sit down and figure this out and set up this as a new program. So what we're offering at Region 1 is to partner in whatever way they need us to partner to get it going. If
From advisory to turnkey.
From serving as an advisor to different levels of technical assistance to turnkey, where we'll run it for them, for example. It just so happens that, and again, nationwide, statewide, and no different here in the Rio Grande Valley, we're dealing with declining enrollment from a combination of things: lower birth rates, more homeschooling, more choices for students, charter schools and others. Possibly, if vouchers passes, then even more choices. So what this does, on the other hand, is quite a few of the districts have space now.
Okay.
So there's school districts around us that are closing down entire campuses, elementary campuses, for example. And so what we're looking at is you've got the space. We can repurpose that building for these young adults. It can also help with things like a lot of the districts are having to lay off staff and different things like that because of declining enrollment, because of the budget. Well, if they enroll these students, that brings enrollment back up. Okay. And that also helps with...
And gets funding from the state.
And gets funding from the state. So everybody wins by getting it done. Now,
Dr. King, in addition to your leadership role with Region 1, you've taken a role on Hidalgo County's Prosperity Task Force.
Yes.
And a lot of what you're saying seems to align with the philosophy of Hidalgo County Judge Richard Cortez.
Yes.
And that is the development of human capital.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, it's very much aligned. I was very excited to see the county judge's initiative, and immediately I knew that Region 1 could play a role in that initiative. And like I said, it's very aligned. First of all, as educators, human capital is, that's our focus, right? And it's exciting when you see a county judge or when you see economic development corporations and chambers and so forth. The more that the emphasis can be on human capital, I think that's the secret sauce. I think that's where we begin to win the game of quality of life and economic development and those kind of things.
So the development of human capital equates to economic development in itself.
Absolutely.
Okay. If someone's interested in the program, how do they get in touch with you? What can you provide by way of contact information?
Yeah, so they can go to the Region 1 website and they can either email us. You can email me. You can email me at dking@esc1.net. And we'll provide whatever information or support is necessary.
Excellent. Any final words?
Just like I said, you just kind of get the word out. It's important. My goal is, again, that every community throughout this 8-county region gets really seriously engaged with helping our young adults who, for whatever reason, have not been able to complete their high school diploma. Help them to do that, and at the same time to prepare for gainful employment, either through industry-based certificates of value that help them get into higher wage employment, or college degrees.
Dr. King, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
In our next episode, we speak with former McAllen Mayor Jim Darling about the issue of water in our region. Join us on December 4th for episode 6 of RGV On the Rise.